So my grandparents were very simple people. My grandfather was an engineer in the mines. They raised 3 daughters on the copper belt in Zambia. And, my grandfather worked sort of 80 hours a week. And later on in life, they finally got the chance to travel. He started working for a French engineering firm, and so they got the chance to go to Paris. This was a big deal. It was only the second time my grandmother had ever left South Africa. And so they go to Paris, and my grandfather takes along a disposable camera. This is the 80s, right? So it still takes film. And it's one of those, most of the audience won't remember this, so I'm going to fill you in. It's a sort of rectangular little camera, and the top flips open. It's a flippy little thing. And you hold the handle, it becomes a handle, and you hold it. You take the photographs. So they spend 5 heady days in Paris, going everywhere, seeing everything. And they come back, and my grandfather takes the camera to have the photos developed, and they find that he has taken 24 pictures of his ear. So the way the camera is, you see, is that it's quite hard to tell the front from the back. And if you are left-handed and you hold the flippy bit in the wrong hand, then in fact, what you are doing is training the lens onto your ear, which is exactly what my grandfather had done. This being the 80s, we kept the pictures. I mean, we paid for them. And the ear got more sunburned, so it was possible to detect some sort of progression. You could see some of the Champs-Élysées behind his ear at points in the movie. It was a bit of a talking point, and we all agreed that my grandfather was a bloody donkey for holding the camera the wrong way around in the first place. It was clearly his fault. Nonetheless, there was a sense in which my grandparents' grand journey to Paris had been well and truly crapped on by a camera whose back wasn't that discernible from its front. So fast forward 30 years, we've got thousands more cameras on the market. And in fact, we have thousands, hundreds of thousands more things. We are surrounded by, I think, we push, pull, prod, poke, and possess more created things than at any other time, I think, in human history. We've got things for taking the pips out of olives. We've got things for putting the stuffing in courgette flowers. We've got little weights to stop our tablecloths blowing up. We've got whiskey glasses. We've got cognac glasses. We've got wine glasses, which are all different. We've got apps to help us regulate our sleeping patterns and to help us find our iPad or the way to Polokwane. We've got tweeting fridges. We've got millions of devices. Anyone who's ever had to move house and pack up a kitchen will realize how many things we have. And that is where you find things that you don't even know what they are. So in The Lord of the Rings, the hobbits have a word for a thing that you don't know what it is. They call it a matham. And a matham is a thing that someone gave you years ago and that you put it in a drawer and you've never actually used it. And you pull it out years later and you realize you have no idea what it is or what it does. I have a matham. It's a sort of a knob thing with 3 spikes on the end. I have no idea what it is. It's a friend of mine gave it to me. I use it to prick holes in the top of cling wrap when I put things in the microwave, because that's what cooking looks like in my house. But I have so we have things that we don't even know what they are, and we find them in our house. So the point here is that we are surrounded by more created things than at any other time in our history. And like my grandfather's camera, those things, more often than not, are a massive, towering source of inordinate frustration. So you get your takeaway coffee cup, and it's got a little thing in the top for you to drink the coffee out of, right? But there's something slightly wrong with the lid underneath where the hole is where you drink the coffee out of. And so the coffee, when you drink it, pours down your front. Of course, you don't initially realize this until you suddenly realize it's all pooled in your crotch, because it always pools in your crotch. So that laptop you have that has more computing power than the first Apollo moon mission gives you the spinning beach ball of death at the very moment when you want to open that presentation, which you absolutely have to open now because everyone is waiting. I discovered a term which I absolutely adore, and that is resistentialism. And this refers to the apparently hostile and spiteful behavior of inanimate objects. It was coined as a joke by a humorous writer called Paul Jennings, but it very accurately describes a whole category of human experience. It really does feel a lot of the time like inanimate objects are against us. And actually, oddly, the more intelligence we have built into these things, the more they seem to perversely want to spite us. And it's out of all proportion to the size of the thing often. So I am an oasis of calm when serious things go wrong. But it's when I try and pull the zip closed on my handbag, and because the handbag is not hanging tautly, it snags, and I'm trying to do it with one hand because I have a cup of coffee in the other hand, which is dripping on my crotch, and I try to, and I eventually wrench it, and I either break the zip or all the fabric gets caught up in the zip, and it's that moment where I feel like, I can't go on. It's too much. I lose the will to live. And it's funny, so we have this massively complex world with all these multiple touch points, innumerable things with which we interact, and they have the power to thwart and frustrate us beyond any of the intellectual, existential problems we encounter. I have an existential crisis maybe once a decade. The spinning beach ball of death happens once a week. And it's inordinately frustrating. And that's why great design and great design thinking plays such a fundamental role in creating human happiness. By designing our experience of what we interact with insight and compassion. By taking away the frustration and making things easy and pleasing, human-centered design can create enormous competitive advantage for clients. So another favorite subject of mine is behavioral economics, and I'm going to draw quite heavily on the works of Rory Sutherland, whom you really should read, if you haven't, and you probably have. Behavioral economics will tell you that people love easy more than they love cheap. They will go with a brand that provides a path. So there was a company in New York called mattress.com, which astonishingly sold mattresses. And they realized that the biggest obstacle to buying a mattress in New York was actually getting rid of the old one. So what they offered, if you bought one of their mattresses, they would come and collect the old one. They made it easy. They made the behavior convenient. They took the stress out. If you give people a measure of progress, they're far more likely to complete the action, hence the loading bar in software. Behavioral economics also tells us that human behavior isn't primarily driven by logic. So the most effective way to change behavior, to get people to do what you want them to do, isn't through logic or reason or trying to change their beliefs. Bob Dylan said, people don't do what they say they believe. They do what's convenient, and then they repent. Studies done by the IPA in the UK have found that it's more effective to change behavior first, and then attitude change follows. And one of the best ways to do that is to just make it easy, to take the frustration, so to make the least frustrating path. People change their behavior because it's easy or convenient, or because their friends are doing it, because you've made it more desirable, and then they rationalize it. So make it easier, more pleasant to adopt a behavior. People will go there and then rationalize it. Once electric cars are easier and less stressful than petrol cars, your carbon problem is probably over. So very, very smart creative thinking based on human insight knows that you don't always have to throw big money at a problem either, or big resources. Surprisingly little things can make a big behavioral difference. I think everyone in this room probably knows the story of Jared Spool and the $300 million button. If you don't, the elevator pitch is that by changing the wording on a button on a website from register to continue, more people closed the deal on the website and bought the products to the tune of about $300 million in 1 year. It's a very simple change. They just took the frustration out. They didn't throw a lot of resources at the problem, just a lot of clever thinking. In the UK, they have LED signs that tell you what the speed limit is, and then they tell you what speed you're doing, accompanied by a smiley face or a frowny face, depending on if you're over the speed limit or under. And these are far more effective than speed cameras, despite the fact that the cameras carry with them a very real and actual threat of punishment. And the reason is the interfaces or the interaction with the thing is more pleasant. It reinforces positive behavior. And it's based on an understanding of how we are as human beings. We're wired to react to faces. We react positively to smiley faces. And so it reinforces the good behavior. This shift to simpler thinking is paradoxically, or the shift of attention to detail is paradoxically a bigger view of design. Very often brands and businesses will throw big money at a problem and try and solve it with a big solution. And actually it's the little details that deliver the biggest results. So this is about thinking about the system, understanding the user, understanding the context, not just thinking about putting elements into the design or the device or the object. You don't even really need to offer a material or tangible difference a lot of the time. So behavioral economics tells us that all value is subjective. The way you sell a 500 Rand bottle of wine is by putting a 1,000 Rand bottle of wine on the menu. So people won't pay 1,000 rand for a bottle of wine, but by comparison, 500 rand doesn't seem like a big deal. A change in perceived value can often be just as satisfying as a change in material or actual value. And again, this is about smarter thinking, about human insights, understanding what it is that turns people on, what frustrates them, making the experience more pleasant. Rory Sutherland talks about why put 10 billion pounds into making the Eurostar go 20 minutes faster when for half the amount of money you could hire male and female supermodels to hand out champagne to all the passengers. Everybody would enjoy the journey, and in fact ask for the train journey to be a lot longer. You'd still have 5 billion pounds left over. Problem solved. So very often you can solve a problem by tinkering with perception rather than trying to change reality as well. Apparently when Post-it notes were launched, they were given to the PAs of the CEOs of some of the top Fortune 500 companies. So the first time people encountered Post-it notes, they were attached to missives from the very, very top. And it made them seem very, very desirable. Again, making the behavior attractive, making it easy to adopt, making it desirable. And there's another very interesting insight from behavioral economics, which is this, that taking the effort to make something pleasing or beautiful can do something very, very interesting. And it tells people subconsciously that you're a serious player. So an example from nature is the peacock. A male peacock has this beautiful tail. And it's an example of proactive fitness advertising because it tells the females that this male has resources to spare, that this is such a fit bird, if you'll pardon the expression, that it can actually put energy and resources into creating this beautiful tail, which isn't entirely necessary for daily physical survival. And it partly works because it's wasteful. I mean, it's not entirely necessary, it's just very, very beautiful and pleasing. We are attracted to people with resources to spare. People who we believe subconsciously that people who invest effort into appearance or reputation are unlikely to rip us off. They're here for the long term. People apparently give twice as much money to charities if the collector is wearing a good brand name t-shirt. And this is gleaned from The Economist, April 4th edition, 2011. See, it's in The Economist, so it must be right. So signaling counts. When you clean a car to sell it, you're telling the buyer that you looked after the engine. They won't be able to tell whether you check the oil or change the oil regularly, but they will infer from what they see. Life would be impossible if we had to have perfect information every time we had to make a decision. And so what we do is we take shortcuts. We look at the externals and we make assumptions. We deduce from what we see. So putting thought and effort into crafting the experience of an object, a service, or a brand, making it harmonious and beautiful, it also signals credibility, trustworthiness, and gravitas for your product, for your service, and for your brand. So I've talked about how the proliferation of things, interfaces, and objects can create enormous stress and noise in our lives, and therefore how smart, user-centered, compassionate design can make it easy for people to choose your brand simply by scripting the path or by taking away frustration. Also about how a bigger understanding of what design can do paradoxically can help us discover that big results can come from very small details or simply from tinkering with perception. And finally, I've spoken about how investing in beautiful design, in considered creativity, signals that your brand is a serious player. I've drawn a lot from behavioral economics today, in particular Rory Sutherland. I thoroughly recommend you read his book, The Wiki Man. I am very happy to give you a list of my other references, along, of course, with the option of an original signed photograph of my grandfather's ear on the Champs-Élysées. Thanks very much.